Welcome to the Texas Values Report. This is Jonathan Saenz, president of Texas Values Action, with a special segment of the Texas Values Report. You know, this election season gives us a great opportunity to tackle some sort of different angles and facets of people that are running for office, particular issues that come up. And thankfully, with some of the work that I do, I travel outside of Texas from time to time. And when I do, sometimes I meet people that are involved in these type of issues, particularly at a national level. And so I'm excited about the guests we have today, and I'll get to that in just a minute. But, you know, we had a great gala over the weekend that I was really excited about. So I'm going to tell you a little bit more about that on the second part of the show, and a lot of election information to break down as we focus on Election Day being tomorrow, Tuesday, November 5th. Polls are 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. and one of the most watched U.S. Senate races in history is going down in the state of Texas, Ted Cruz versus Colin Allred. But we have a great guest today who is a part of a book that just came out just over a month ago. Perfect timing, too, about what's going on with our elections and the personalities. My good friend, Erin Brownback, is a messaging specialist. And, you know, over the years, we've interacted and run into each other in different circles related to faith, family, and freedom. So someone who has a tremendous amount of credibility. I know she's done some work with Alliance Defending Freedom. She has her master's degree from Carnegie Mellon University. And I won't get into a topic about her bio. That's really actually a good thing. That was, I found, very interesting and fabulous. But maybe we'll focus on that another day. So, Erin Brownback, welcome to the Texas Values Report.
Jonathan, thanks for having me.
Well, look, and you know, you and I ran into each other and got to hang out a little bit at RNC in Milwaukee, which, you know, this is my first time to participate as a delegate at the RNC. I had been to the one in Cleveland, I believe, in 2016, but was only there for a couple of days. I spent the entire week there and had a official role, but you were there quite a bit. You know, this has been an active 2 or 3 months, and right in the middle of that, and I know that, you know, you like to make your way around the country at a lot of important events, but you know, you've probably had a busy time. And in the middle of that, somehow you were able to release a book, which this is a book about Tim Walz called Stolen Valor, the Military Fraud and Government Failures of Tim Walz. I've never written a book or published one, so I can imagine you getting the timing just right, if you will. Coming up to the election had a little bit of challenge, but you pulled it off. And what a great time for this to come out, for people to learn about someone who could end up becoming the vice president of the United States.
Absolutely, Jonathan. It was a whirlwind, as you know, this season is. And I had just a wonderful privilege of being the guest of the Speaker of the House during the Republican National Convention. But then in the midst of that, my co-author, Josh Manning, and I, we recently wrote a book called Out of the Shadows, which is about the unclaimed grandchild of President Biden, Hunter Biden's daughter, Navy. And we were then approached by a publisher who said, we want you to write a book about Tim Walz and his military fraud. So 20 years ago, John Kerry had run for the presidency, and the Swift boat captains, as you might remember, came out and said, he's lying about his military career. And they wrote a book, and it torpedoed his campaign. Well, similarly, Tim Walz was picked to be the vice presidential candidate. We had a very short amount of time to put the book together, so it just was it was a race, it was a sprint. But we found as we were writing this, there was so much more to this potential vice president, one heartbeat away from the president, this person and his policies, and the way that they have been influenced by his Marxist values, that we thought we've got to do a book that covers both his military and government careers, his political career. And so that's what we put out in Stolen Valor.
Well, look, and, you know, vice presidential picks and as part of a presidential ticket, I mean, they matter, but a lot of times it's not all that relevant. I mean, particularly if you have a strong candidate that's running for president. But sometimes there are candidates that need it, right? And I think the way that things turned out with Biden stepping aside, or however you want to describe that whole situation, right after the RNC, which was probably one of the most successful conventions and events for the RNC ever. I mean, I was there, so it was a lot more of a real experience, but there was just feedback I got from people about that all over the country. People that were like, oh, I wish I was there. And, I had my son there the last day because I flew him up and I was like, this is going to be historic. You got to come up. And he's getting to vote for the first time this year as a freshman in college. And so, look, the Republicans come out of that. There's a lot of momentum, and it just feels like Biden is on the ropes and they're in trouble. Numbers are sinking. And, we might have guessed that Kamala Harris might end up, becoming a nominee or there was some circumstance, but it just didn't seem likely. And it seemed like it would be a total mess and create a lot of negative attention. But that's what ended up happening. And so I imagine there wasn't a lot of time, too. Now we got to pick a vice president. So I think my point is she needed a strong vice presidential pick, in my opinion. I don't think Tim Walz was that solution. Someone thought that was a great idea, but for y'all to be right on spot with this book, because a lot of people are probably like, who is this guy? And why did she pick him? And how's this going to play out on the ticket? Tell us a little bit about the book and Tim Walz and the significance and in the book as far as the concerns that people have that are relevant to this election.
Absolutely. So just the first concern, the one that came to the surface as his name started being circulated out there, was we had National Guardsmen who talked to us about their experience serving with Tim Walz and all of the fraud and lies in his military career, which then you find come out throughout his political career as well. This false stories, false narratives, straight out lies. So on the military side, there's three things that are significant. First, Tim Walz was a fairly senior officer. He served for 24 years, and we thank anybody who serves our nation. However, for 24 years, he took a paycheck from the American people to be ready to go to war when he was called. And he knew before his battalion was called up to go to war that they were about to be called. So because he was a senior officer, he had advanced knowledge, and he quit when they were being called to go to Iraq into battle. So he took that paycheck for 24 years, and he wasn't available when his country called him. Second, when he left, he started calling himself a retired command sergeant major.
Wow.
He actually was demoted because he left without finishing his training to be a command sergeant major. And that in and of itself is an act of stolen valor, which is punishable by fines or imprisonment if he is charged with this. So you cannot claim a military rank or a military honor that you haven't earned. It is not legal to do that. And that is what he's done. And it's so bad that when the Harris campaign website found out the reality after they had chosen him, they had to go back and change the information about him to be his accurate rank, because he was lying to the public and allowing people to lie on his behalf. And then the third thing.
Hang on just a second there. I want to make sure I heard you. We're talking with Erin Brownback. She is one of the authors of a book that just came out a little over a month ago, Stolen Valor, The Military Fraud and Government Failures of Tim Walz. Are you saying, or is this a situation that he was dishonest even to Kamala Harris in the campaign, or at least the information that was provided they weren't aware of?
Yes. And
Wow.
they had to go and do cleanup on their website.
Unbelievable. Okay, I'm sorry I interrupted you. Go to point three.
No.
The reason
So
three.
point three, also he has lied, he has let other people lie. He talks about how he creates this persona of a battle-hardened veteran, and he talks about how he carried weapons of war in combat. That is a lie. Tim Walz never served in combat. The closest he got was a deployment to a lovely place in Italy.
Wow.
He never was in Iraq, and he never carried weapons of war in combat. And he has said that and allowed others to say that about him, to create this persona that just isn't true.
Well, and look, I've not served in the military in any capacity. But I tell you, just from the debate and other times I've seen him, and I know there are a lot of memes out there, okay, but just overall, he doesn't look like someone who strikes a lot of confidence in people, or somebody that would be real sturdy in a military setting. That's just my opinion. But I've talked to people before that have served in the military, and sometimes this is the case as a lawyer, people that go to JAG school or some other type of route where they don't end up in combat. And at least one person that I'm close with said, when I talked about their military, his military service, he was quick to tell me, "Hey, I never served in combat though," and there was a distinction that he wanted to make, which I appreciated, because there is a difference there when you go into that situation. Even though I'm sure he would have if it was necessary, he was not called. And I remember when Tim Walz was first announced as the vice presidential pick for the Democrats, there was a lot of discussion about different medals that they saw him wearing, or some fraud that was going on, or some misconception about that. And so these are serious matters in the military world, that a lot of times many of us may or not be aware of. But to your point, is fraud, it's stolen valor. I mean, and what does that say about the type of leader he would be for our country?
You're right. And a lot of people, we don't live in the military. We don't know all of the regulations of the military and what's expected. We know what it means to be honorable, and we know what it means to honor those who have served honorably, and that isn't this situation. But what does matter to every single American as we're getting ready to go to the polls tomorrow, what matters to every American is that same dishonorable attribute that Tim Walz has, and the way that he has applied it to his political career. And more importantly, when he was a young officer, he went to China, and China grooms foreign military officials. That's part of what they do to spread their ideals of Marxism. And they have groomed Tim Walz, and you can see through all of his policies how he is working to spread Marxism in Minnesota, and how he would work to spread it to the nation if he were vice president.
Well, and there are probably some people that are that's good for them, or that's something that's almost a selling point, sadly. But I would think the overwhelming majority of Americans, and even a good chunk of Democrats, that would concern them, and rightly so. I mean, there's a lot of things going on right now between us and China, and I think it's very critical in this election decision that people are making. Someone who, we don't want somebody as vice president and now they're going to answer to China. And sadly, we have to think about that. President Trump, twice they tried to assassinate him before he even became president, even though he's a former president. There's a very hostile environment and culture we're living in where some people are ready to take matters into their own hands. And so it's a very real possibility. What are some of the issues related to the Marxism? I know you get in some of that in the detail in the book related to the sexualization of children, abortion, COVID, the George Floyd riots. I know we're part of the issue in Minnesota, but what are some of the issues that tie in to the Marxism and the China connection for Tim Walz?
Yeah, so a lot of people just they don't know what Marxism is. They don't understand that it's the theory that undergirds communism, this idea of a collectivist society. And in order to bring about the ideals of Marxism, there are two things that have to be torn down, because to have a Marxist society, everybody is loyal primarily to the state, and otherwise it's a collectivist society. But what gets in the way of that is the church and the family, because people will be loyal to their family and loyal to their church over being loyal to the state. So when you look at Tim Walz's policies around the sexualization of children, it is this obsession with dismantling the traditional family and sexual norms. So he has created in Minnesota this haven for transitioning children. And you can bring any child, does not have to be your child, to Minnesota. You only have to be acting as a parent, and they will do chemical and surgical alterations on that child to appear as the opposite sex. And if a parent tries to stand in the way, the state will take custody of the child away from the parent and return the child to the parent once that child has been transed. So in addition, he has signed laws to make pedophilia a protected class in Minnesota. So if you have a second grade teacher who says he's attracted to children sexually, you cannot fire him for that reason. It is illegal.
Well,
If you're hired
okay,
in a
hold on a
nanny,
sec, Erin. I mean, this is you're talking about, I can't even imagine there's 1% of the American population that would support something like that. It's crazy to me to think that somehow that became law in Minnesota. I mean, has he tried to explain his position on this issue, Waltz?
Yeah, so in the book Stolen Valor, we describe exactly how this came about. And they have said they don't want homosexuals to feel like they are sort of lumped in with
Yeah.
pedophiles. And so in their laws, they changed the language in their human rights bill. They changed the language to say that sexual orientation is between two adults because it was this bill to protect
Yeah.
gay rights. And so when they took that language out, which was something, if you read the story, it's wild. It was something that they had a one vote majority in the Senate, and one senator said, "You will take this language out," even though everyone had agreed not to take it out, or you will not be able to pass any other bills because we only have this one vote majority, and I am not going to vote for anything if you don't take it out. And so they did. They took the language out. And now, if you're hiring a babysitter or a preschool worker and you know that they're sexually attracted to children, you cannot not hire them for that reason. It is
Well,
illegal.
look, we're talking with Erin Brownback. She is the author of a book that just came out a little over a month ago. Very timely, Stolen Valor, The Military Fraud and Government Failures of Tim Walz, who just happens to be the vice presidential nominee for the Democratic ticket for president of the United States. This is an issue that is incredibly important right now and is growing in importance, sadly. At our gala over the weekend on Saturday, we had Chloe Cole, who many people know is a young lady who at 12 years old, I believe, started transitioning from a girl to a boy, or whatever it was being called at that time because of some feelings that she was having. She was lied to by the medical community, really coached in a lot of ways. And when she tells her story, but at some point she realized this is not what I want to do, and this is not healthy for me. Sadly, she had a lot of things already happen to her, some surgeries where she, body parts were removed that can never be restored, and she'll never be the same. She cannot naturally have children of her own, but she is so courageous to now allow God's design for her as a beautiful woman just to be natural and to settle into that and go around the country and talk about that. She was sharing that story a little bit with some people at our event. Numerous states have passed laws saying you can't do this to kids. These can't. So we know this is playing out, and we know that if the government can get in the way of the parents, which sounds like Marxism, right? You would see more of this because many parents are not allowing it, and they don't want to be taken out of the equation. But not to mention, your point is the parents are being punished for trying to protect their kids from this. So it's at a whole nother level. And, we've seen some of this in Texas where our laws have been pretty strong on it, but, you see people maybe gravitate to another state where it's, so-called more friendly, and these things will happen. And I imagine they will put pressure on the federal government to allow these type of things if he's the vice president of the United States.
Yes, and he removed all restrictions on abortion, which is why a child can be born after a botched abortion and be left to die, which was something that he lied about, and the moderators of the VP debate lied about. But also, a 10-year-old girl could show up pregnant at an abortion facility in Minnesota, cash in hand, get an abortion, be turned back out on the street to whoever brought her, whoever impregnated her, and Walz signed laws to make it illegal for his law enforcement to investigate any abortions done on minor children, even children coming from other states. So he has essentially pulled Minnesota out of the union by not abiding by the laws of the union from other states. So it's significant. It's something that affects every family, every child in our nation. And these are things he would push for at a national level like he has at a state level.
Well, we've seen some of these things in California. Our good friend, I'm sure you're friends with Jonathan Keller as well, and his team, Sophia Laurie, a lot of great people there trying to fight these issues. And, they can just be overwhelming in states like that when you have someone like that in the governor's office, even though they're trying to continue to push back. The book is called Stolen Valor, The Military Fraud and Government Failures of Tim Walz. You can get it on Amazon. I was just looking earlier. There's a couple of good reviews for you, right? So a little momentum there. Some people saying great things about the book, but, some great detail for people to be talking about. Election day is tomorrow, so you need to think quick. If these, if you still haven't made a decision on these issues in this type of information could be really key. Erin, I just want to talk a little bit about sort of your background professionally, though. You focus on strategic messaging and things of that nature. Anything, trends or anything you're seeing going on with the messaging of the two presidential campaigns, so to speak, that has gotten your attention, has sort of maybe, been unique from the perspective you come from? I mean, you've been a lot of events, we've run into each other, and you see a lot of different speeches. Anything stand out to you that maybe is different, in 2020, maybe for Trump, than this year in 2024, that could make a difference at the ballot box?
Yes, well, on the Democrat side, before President Biden was pushed out of running for office, which he was committed to doing until he was pressured to leave, the messaging on the Democrat campaign was we have to save democracy. Interestingly, because they appointed a candidate who had never been elected to that role when they brought in Kamala to run for president, they had to abandon the messaging of we're going to save the democracy because they didn't follow a democratic process. So you saw
How
a
inconvenient.
yes, you saw a quick shift. I'm sure you noticed to the new message after that was he's weird. I mean, everybody was saying it. He's weird. Whoever was doing their strategic messaging needed help because he's weird was not the most effective message. But what you've seen since then is a movement toward this messaging of being a joyful warrior. And the politics of joy is a message from Marxism and communism. They promise this sort of ethereal joy while taking away all the rights of the people and saying the government will just be your parent. And so that actually is, also, Kamala talks frequently about being able to envision a future unburdened by the things that have come before. Another Marxist message. So
is that how she said it too? I've watched that clip, so I'm like, what is she saying? I'm not trying to be rude. I'm just like, that makes sense to anyone? I don't know. Continue. I'm sorry.
It's not word salad. It's a mantra. It's a Marxist mantra, saying like we can move forward while abandoning all of where we've come from, and that's what they're looking for. A Marxist America would be an abandonment of America's foundation and who we have been created to be and who we have been for the last 200 years. And that is what Vice President Harris and Governor Walz, that is what they would like to see happen if they get to the White House.
Well, I do see the entrance and, the platform that J.D. Vance has been a big difference in this campaign. Obviously, those two different personalities, Mike Pence versus J.D. Vance, some key differences there. I had the pleasure of being at an event here in Austin where I got to see J.D. Vance in person. I will admit I had heard his name before but didn't know a lot about him. And I think that's been, a real strength for President Trump. And I mean, if you look at the contrast to your point, joyful warrior versus some guy with his fist up with blood coming down the side of his face, yelling fight. And I think that's more of him being in touch with what's really going on and what we're up against and needing that type of strength. And J.D. Vance, not being fooled by anyone and not being afraid to really push the envelope, if you will, when necessary and call people out on not only on social media, but with the traditional media in a very smart and polite way, but in a necessary way, and putting some of those people back on their heels. The guy knows his facts. Well, we're going to find out, I think, in a little over 24 hours how this is going to turn out, or at least the first phase of it. At least voting should be over by then. And so there'll be a lot more to talk about. So we'd love to have you come back. But what a great opportunity you've had with this book. And I know that you care a lot about these issues. You and I have been working on these different fields that touch on these things for, a couple of decades. And, I have a lot of uncertainty, more so than I've had before, but I'm glad that I feel like I at least am a little bit closer to the process, and I know you are as well. So we'll see what happens in a day or so. And how do you feel? Are you optimistic? What are your emotions these days going into tomorrow?
I feel very hopeful. I also feel a great sense of urgency. I think everybody who is listening needs to not only have voted themselves, but be sure that the people that are in your sphere have voted. A lot of evangelicals don't turn out to vote. A lot of people say, oh, I don't like either candidate. And really, we're not sending a Valentine to one of these candidates. We are making a move in a chess match. And there are candidates who will take us in a Marxist direction, and there are candidates who won't. And you need to be extremely wise about that. And I hope that all of the people who listen to you, Jonathan, are encouraging the people around them to take the steps that we need to save the nation, to preserve it, and to be able to move forward as a strong country.
Well, I'm not attaching you to this campaign, but you do come across to me as a joyful warrior. So I think that can be a compliment for good reasons. Erin Brownback is author of the book Stolen Valor, The Military Fraud and Government Failures of Tim Walz. You can get it on Amazon, other platforms, other places, I'm sure. And Erin has been our guest today on the Texas Values Report. Thanks, Erin.
Thanks, Jonathan.
Okay, I've got less than a minute. Great, amazing gala over the weekend. Christian actor David A.R. White was fantastic. A lot of elected officials, a lot of energy and attention in the room. And I was excited about, us being there and just being a part of this moment that are playing out as we move into just a day left before election. Still time, though. The cruise race is going to be it's at a statistical tie, okay? If you don't vote, you could be the deciding vote. I'm not exaggerating. I mean, people have to understand when polls tell you time and again, it's tied, or it's within 1 point or whatever. You have to assume your vote could make the difference, right? And this is going to be a huge turnout. George Soros has spent a lot of money against Ted Cruz. We've endorsed Ted Cruz, Texas Values Action has, and it's going to be a lot closer. I mean, the presidential race, I don't think is going to be close in Texas. We'll see. Don't take anything for granted on that. But the Senate race is, and we've been hearing that for a couple of months. So do not be that deciding vote by not showing up, all right? We got some great resources on our website, txvaluesaction.org. If you want to see some of the arguments, the difference in the candidates, it's very clear. It's night and day. You want to look at some of the other endorsements that we've made, they are many. And if you have a candidate that didn't get endorsed, you want to reach out to us, find out why, maybe get a last-minute endorsement, go to our website, txvalues.org, send an email at info@txvaluesaction.org. I may sleep in the next couple of days. I may not. We'll just have to see how it plays out because a lot of work to do. And there's a lot of what I call productive paranoia going on, to borrow a phrase from Jim Collins, because we want to stay active and productive until that last minute. We're going to be making phone calls, all kinds of stuff to encourage people to vote, to help them understand the importance. And look, turnout seems to be almost at record levels as it is, as far as that's the trend we're on. But that's not a reason to say, well, it's already settled because so many people have voted. Absolutely not. I mean, could we see statewide a 70% turnout? We might, right? In some counties, could we see over 80% turnout? We might. Right? And you got to expect that other side's going to try to do the same thing too. I'm not kidding. You could be the deciding vote. Do not stay home. Tell friends and family to not do the same thing as well and to go vote. Government belongs to those who show up. So show up, and we'll continue to bring you updates on these issues. If you need other talking points or the details, txvaluesaction.org. You want to donate to our work, please do that. It costs a significant amount of money, not $100 million like the Cruz and All Red race, but a good chunk of money, up to close to $1 million. txvaluesaction.org. You can donate to help us protect with endorsements our candidates that support faith, family, and freedom in Texas. And we'll talk to you next time from this special segment of the Texas Values Report, brought to you by Texas Values Action.